Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Visual Thin 3778. AITA for telling my husband he can't be friend with the lesbian he had an emotional affair with? TLTR. Husband had an emotional affair with lesbian friend that started through a D&D campaign. He wants to maintain the group friendships and potentially rejoin the group with her still involved, and I disagree. Story time. My husband, 37M, and myself, 37F, have been friends for 10 years and partners for 5. We recently got married and bought a house for our family. He has younger children, I have none. We met at work and both are currently still employed at the same job and share many of the same friends and acquaintances. We work opposite schedules, so we don't get to share a lot of time together. My partner is very shy, an affectionate man, and gentle giant of sorts. He's a hugger of friends and very giving of his kindness and compassion. I suffered an injury a couple of years back that left me housebound for a long period of time. During that time, I discovered Vox Machina, which led to Critical Role, and a shared interest in D&D between my partner and I. We watched the campaigns together, and I encouraged the idea of joining a group if the opportunity arose. About a year later, my partner discovered a D&D group through co-workers in his department. The Dungeon Master, Xander, 28M, and my partner became fast friends and began spending a lot of time together, working out, doing chores, etc. I encouraged my partner to pursue his new friendships and hobbies because of the joy it brought him. Xander hosted a house party and offered to run a one-shot D&D story so that my partner could finally check out the game firsthand. Most of the other people playing were fellow co-workers and had been an established D&D party for a while. I was present and enjoyed the experience of watching my partner become less shy and dive into the world of roleplay. The group, Xander, Ben, Charles, Serge, and Dolores, invited my partner into the core campaign. He joined with my full support, knowing I wouldn't be able to join or attend because of my schedule. I work AM shifts. I gave him my player handbook, monster manual, and some accessories to carry his growing collection. Months down the road into playing, my partner toyed with the idea of starting a D&D romance with Dolores, 26F. RP relationships are a normal part of D&D from what I gathered, and I knew Dolores and the group at this point. Dolores is a fellow co-worker, and both my partner and I had been acquainted with her for a while. She presents Mask and will passionately tell you that she is a gold star lesbian. My partner began writing episodic retellings of the happenings within their campaign from the week prior. He was very passionate about putting the campaign to page and telling the story of his friends and their journey. The retelling began to include very descriptive romantic scenes involving my partner's character and Dolores's character. Again, I was not bothered by any of this. Dolores is a lesbian, my partner is with me, and this is just a fantasy campaign. He started spending large portions of free time going to parties at Xander's house and other functions the D&D group were invited to. Due to my schedule, I was unable to attend most festivities. However, my partner had my full support and trust to enjoy the social perks of his new friendships. My partner starts asking if Dolores can come over and hang out with us on our days off. We all shared a joy and love of nerd things, and we started hanging out and watching streams of D20 and other D&D-based shows. It wasn't until a few times of Dolores coming over that I started to notice small things that made me uncomfortable. She would sit close to him on the couch and lean into him at first. Then I would catch her placing her hand on his back and running her fingers along his spine. My partner would giggle with her in a schoolboy way, and he would look at her in a way I'd only seen him look at me. Flirtatious, playful. Mind you, I have never had a close lesbian friend, or lesbian friend in general, so I don't understand the culture or behavior. I have always been open-minded and willing to learn from different backgrounds and cultures, so I really was giving a benefit of the doubt that this behavior was normal in her community. I mentioned my concern to my partner about the touching, and he agreed he would talk to Dolores about it. After their talk, he assured me that he and Dolores were just close friends, and they discussed her preferences, and that he was engaged at this point. So I ignored my discomfort when the touching and sitting close together continued. Soon, It became more than hanging out at our home with us on days off. When my partner was not with Dolores, he would be constantly texting and Snapchatting with her throughout the day. So much so that I found myself subconsciously competing for my partner's attention and time. We had maintained intimacy and communication, but I still found myself vying for his time. A few months later, a fellow co-worker outside of D&D approached me and asked how I felt about Dolores and my partner's friendship. She mentioned a concern that others had from watching interactions between the two. My co-worker explained that they had come to a party a couple nights prior and were acting very close. I got defensive for both Dolores and my partner and explained that they were just close friends and Dolores is a lesbian. I explained that they were judging something unfairly and I was aware and supportive of their friendship. Respectfully, my co-worker agreed and understood my feelings on the matter. Both my partner and Dolores had follow-up conversations with me and assured me they were just friends and people were assuming things. I had no reason to mistrust them, and so I believed that the friendship was close, yet innocent. My partner and I were aware of a girl Dolores was interested in, but hadn't really perused because of various reasons she provided. So we just assumed Dolores was close to my partner because we were a place of safety and comfort. My partner and I were married at the end of summer. We purchased and closed on our first home after 5 years of budgeting. We were beginning the next chapter in our lives as a family unit. A little less than a month later, my partner asked if Dolores could come over on our day off. I begrudgingly agreed, because at this point Dolores was always around on our free time. If she wasn't, then my partner would be texting or snapping her throughout the day. So I agreed, and Dolores came over like any other night. I left the room later into the evening for a moment, and again Dolores was sitting with my partner on the couch, leaned into him. However, when I came back from the other room, Dolores had one arm wrapped around his bicep, while she was stroking his forearm slowly with the other. I was immediately uncomfortable and angry. My partner followed me out of the room and away from Dolores when he could tell I was visibly upset. While in the other room I stated, "The cuddling is going to stop. I don't know what that is, but if that is what other people are seeing at D&D and parties, no wonder they were concerned." He agreed and said that he was also uncomfortable, and Dolores had never done anything like that before. He agreed he would talk to her, and when we went back into the room with Dolores, my partner sat apart from her until she went home. The next day, my partner and I discuss what happened the night before. While discussing the matter, he admits to me that he has developed a crush on Dolores, and he wanted to tell me once he realized it was more than friendship. I was crushed. I felt like a cuckold in my own house. I felt like a complete moron for not listening to my instincts in the beginning. I told my partner his friendship with Dolores was over, and he needed to tell her the truth of his feelings for her. Dolores responded by telling him she has had something similar happen in her past, and she was going to step away. However, I also texted Dolores and called her out on her behavior and affection toward my partner. I explained that with all due respect her preference, she certainly was not acting the way she presented or advocated that she was. Dolores responded and confirmed my suspicions. She said she had grown close to my partner and didn't know when the line was crossed, but that she had developed feelings for him. She admitted to knowing she should have set boundaries, but ignored her judgment because she liked the affection and attention she was getting from my partner. She apologized and offered to take a step back from my partner and I, but defended that she and my partner could potentially be friends in the future with the proper boundaries. I understand that he is fluid. However, Dolores knew my partner was engaged, and she had other options to fill that void. More and more information started to present itself after the blow-up and admitted feelings. I came to find that Dolores initiated the touching at least 6 months prior at D&D. She started sitting close to my partner. That turned into setting her hand close to his so they would touch. Then her leg would touch his leg. Then she started holding his hand. Then she started rubbing his back and his leg. Although she initiated this type of affection, my partner went along and enabled the behavior through lack of boundaries. The other party members watched their interactions, and Xander even mentioned concern to my partner, though my partner assured him it was just friendship as well. Dolores and my partner would sit at parties together. They would take breaks and lunches at work and sit closely together. They walked each other to their cars after shifts. So often, in fact, that other coworkers were uncomfortable watching Dolores interact with my partner behind my back. He claimed it was only supposed to be friendship and nothing more. He says he never went into this experience wanting anything other than friends, and I believe him. I truly believe he did go into this situation innocently. He did the right thing immediately after our fight and apologized to the friends he had lied to about he and Dolores. He owned up to his part of the problem. Dolores, on the other hand, did not. She talked to Xander after a month, but I don't know anything about the conversation. I was very angry in the beginning and forbade him from having anything to do with Dolores or the D&D group. I felt betrayed that none of the other party members would be adult enough to notify me of strange behaviors, especially if they had talked to my partner prior, and the behavior stayed the same. I felt Dolores had lied and manipulated her way through a fake D&D relationship to manifest her feelings for my partner into a real-world relationship. I was betrayed for 6 months, unaware these two had an emotional affair behind my back, and I could not trust anyone in the group. I didn't want him keeping any connections available for Dolores to slither her way back in. I am not withholding blame for my partner. He knows he messed up and how he messed up. He is currently in therapy, and I am trying to do the same as well. We recently had another blow-up regarding the situation, which led to a breakthrough in why this all happened. My little sister passed suddenly last year, and I was raised to self-soothe and problem-solve. During my grief, I subconsciously went into self-preserving as I had done many times in my life when dealing with a traumatic experience. However, my partner is affectionate and giving, and he wanted to support me the way he knew how. I am affectionate, but not to the degree my partner is, and because of that, he felt unwanted and unneeded in my grief. I did not realize I was pushing him away, and I take full responsibility for my part in making him feel underappreciated. Because of this, he found that comfort in Xander and his new friendships. He consumed himself with people that needed him because he had convinced himself I didn't. When I realized I was not processing my grief the way I wanted, I reached for my partner, and he wasn't there. He had grown resentful that I needed him now, and wasn't convinced I was being sincere in my desire for him. He had filled his time with people who needed him. He filled his time with attention and affection from Dolores, and almost used it to show me he was getting what he wanted, and he didn't need me for it. So in my grief, I pushed away and failed to be a better spouse to my partner. I will not make an excuse for my failure in this as well. With that said, I had agreed that once we have fixed things within our own marriage, he could pursue his relationships again with everyone, except Dolores. I said that explaining things opened different perspectives and options moving forward, but they don't excuse certain things, especially Dolores' conscious choice to pursue my partner. My partner, his friends, and his therapist feel that I am isolating him by making them choose between he and Dolores. He wants the option to go back to D&D, even if Dolores is there, so he can prove to me, himself, and her that he's just there for friends and he is capable of setting boundaries. He thinks that, because I don't want him involved with Dolores, I am forcing his friends to choose between him or her. I have explained that Xander and the others can make time for my partner without the need for Dolores to be there. No matter what I explain, plead, compromise, or provide examples for, it is met with resistance because I am making them choose between the two. If he assured me that Dolores was a closed chapter in our book, I would be able to move on without so much insecurity and defense. I've told him this. I've begged for him to let her go. He wonders why I am emotionally flooding and still thick in betrayal trauma when he can't put Dolores behind him because she's a part of the core group. He tells me Wen would like to think in the future that he can go back to D&D, and regardless if Dolores is there, he can prove it will be different. OP is not an AH for setting boundaries after her husband's emotional affair with Dolores. Here, OP's husband is being unreasonable and adamant. OP is not isolating his husband. Rather, she is trying to protect their marriage, but OP's husband behaves AH. So, I would rate him 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from baked_patat_ho. AITA for expecting my daughter's father to completely cut off his brother and threatening to take him to court for full custody and only allowing his supervised visits. I'm 24F, currently 32 weeks pregnant, and I have a 4-year-old daughter, Gwen. I spent over 4 years in an on and off relationship with Manny, 28M, her father, and ended things a little over a year ago. Manny has struggled with a drinking problem, and by the end of our relationship, he was clear that he had no interest in changing. He put work first, refused therapy, and shut down whenever I tried to address issues or ask him to take accountability. There was no cheating, but the drinking often got out of hand, even leading to one physical altercation. After our breakup, we continued living together for a while and stayed intimate. It was easy, familiar, and he would make vague promises about working things out, which he later changed his mind. I finally left, moving in with my mom, and then found out I was pregnant. Manny again promised to change, so I moved back with him, thinking we could co-parent Gwen, and he'd be there for this pregnancy. Unfortunately, I ended up back in the cycle of broken promises. Shortly after I agreed to move back, Manny told me his brother, Brian, 30M, was relocating from out of state and suggested we all live together. This would include Brian's pregnant wife, Maria, 36F, and his son, Adrian, 14M. Though Brian is Gwen's godfather, she has a special nickname for him, I wasn't thrilled, especially since I knew Maria mistreated Adrian. Adrian had just moved from his abusive bio-mom's home to live with Brian, but because Brian's job keeps him away for days, Adrian was often left alone with Maria, who constantly bullied him. Brian's love for his wife prevented him from standing up to her, so Adrian was frequently subjected to her evil stepmother behavior. Moving in together seemed like a risky decision, but Manny persuaded me that it was a good idea for our family. After Manny's brother, Brian, and his family moved in, things were uncomfortable but manageable until my daughter, Gwen, came to me with a problem. She complained of itching on her privates, which I assumed was possibly because she may not have wiped right, but her next comments concerned me. She begged me to only use a wipe to clean her, not fingers, which seemed odd. I asked calmly if anyone had touched her inappropriately. She told me, using her unique nickname for him, that Brian had touched her. I immediately brought Manny into the room and asked her again, and Gwen specifically indicated the parts Brian had touched. Unsure of the next step, I decided we would stay in our room for the rest of the night, and I'd address it in the morning. That morning, I called a friend who urged me to go to the police. I informed Manny of my plan, and though his indifferent response should have been a red flag, I attributed it to him being in shock. Gwen and I went to the police, where we received a case number, then to the Children's Hospital for an exam, which showed no physical evidence of severe trauma or penetration, though that didn't necessarily mean nothing had happened. Afterward, we met with CPS, and later, a child forensic psychologist interviewed Gwen. While we waited for updates, Manny acted as if nothing had happened since there wasn't proof, but Gwen and I tried to avoid Brian and his family at all costs. Finally, CPS and the psychologist concluded they believed beyond reasonable doubt the had happened. They explained, however, that Brian likely wouldn't face arrest due to a lack of physical evidence. We began working on getting a protective order, as it was unlikely Brian would face any legal consequences. Yet for Gwen's safety, it was crucial that he and his family leave the house immediately. Manny asked that Gwen and I stay at my mom's for a week to give them time to move out. Despite the circumstances, he continued to interact with Brian as usual, eating, drinking, and socializing with him, while I, at 28 weeks pregnant and recently put on bed rest, was sleeping on my mom's couch with Gwen. Manny rarely updated me or checked on us, and when the week ended, he asked for an additional week, spending his free time at the bar drinking after work. My family was disappointed with how he handled everything. Finally, after 2 weeks, Gwen and I were able to go home, but a discussion about Manny's drinking led to an argument where he dismissed my concerns, asking for more understanding. I tried to be patient, but when I brought up therapy and addressing the relationship issues, he said he felt there was nothing he needed to change, claiming I was too emotional and brought him problems. I realized then it was long overdue for me to let go for Gwen's sake. When I confronted him about continuing to visit Brian, he justified it by saying he didn't want to lose his only family in the state, adding that since Brian hadn't been charged, we really don't know what happened. He then accused me of projecting my own trauma onto Gwen, implying I had somehow influenced her accusations. I asked if he believed Gwen, to which he responded that he had to because he didn't want to lose her, not because he truly accepted what she said. That was my breaking point. With no immediate place to move and needing to switch apartments, I arranged for my brother and dad to help with moving, but Manny instead called Brian and his nephew, forcing Gwen and me to leave until they were gone, not returning until after midnight. Just days later, he went to Brian's house again for his nephew's birthday, coming home drunk well after midnight. The following day, I decided to stay with my mum temporarily, as his ongoing drinking and closeness with Brian made me feel unsafe and disregarded. I told Manny that if he refused to cut off his brother to protect our daughter, he needed to delete all photos of her from social media so Brian wouldn't have access to her. I also informed him he couldn't take her anywhere unsupervised. Additionally, I told him he wouldn't be in the delivery room for our unborn daughter's birth, or have his name on her birth certificate, especially since he had demanded a paternity test. He insisted he believed she was his but wanted proof. I agreed to wait, as the test is expensive and wouldn't be possible before her birth. He tried to reassure me, promising he'd stop seeing Brian, but after years of broken promises, I don't trust him. I have seen notifications on his phone of texts and calls from Brian in the last few days. I fear he'd still allow Brian around Gwen, or even communicate with him if I wasn't there. Lately, he's been pushy about spending time alone with her and has become suddenly attentive, which feels off to me given his past indifference. When I told Manny's sister, she downplayed it, saying Gwen showed no signs of trauma and that Brian had never been accused before. My family agrees with my boundaries, but Manny's family thinks I'm blowing this out of proportion. So, am I the here? I know I'm my daughter's voice right now, and I want to fight for her. My mom thinks I should make it public and let any family with little children that he might have had access to know. I don't know if it is a good idea, though. Please be kind when responding. OP is not an AH for standing up to protect her daughter and setting boundaries for her daughter's safety after credible allegation of child abuse. OP's husband is an AH for refusing to cut off his brother, and his dismissive behavior shows that he does not care about his daughter. As for scores, I would rate OP's X4 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the next story from Lara D to MR Dr. AITA for dumping a friend after the election. I know everyone has heard a different story by now, but I did not want to be one of those people who dropped a friend because they share different values than I. I, a Democrat, had a very close friend, a Republican. She was raised Republican and never in her life voted until 2020. Now she had a baby with a Democrat, and when they broke up in 2020, she suddenly started dressing the baby in MAGA gear, was going hard on social media about politics, and was gaining a lot of MAGA friends. I thought she was doing this to get under her ex's skin. But even after 2020, and the custody case that gave her sole custody, and the baby daddy was out of her life for good, she was still MAGA. I let it go because we had a Democrat in office, and everything was going well. I had no concern with her because she never really brought up politics to me after the election. Then in 2023, she started sending me these videos of her talking at a podium about kids and I didn't watch the videos, to be honest. I just let her send them to me. She told me she was the leader of the NJ chapter Gays Against Groomers. I was curious, and I looked them up, and the first line on Wikipedia states, a far-right anti-gay group. I asked her about the claim, and she said, not the NJ chapter. We love the gays here. Now, my ignorance didn't let me dive more deeply, and also I was going through many personal things in 2023, so I again let it go. Jump to the day after the election. She calls me exclaiming how Trump won and how America will be great once again. I ask, what part of America was so great, and why weren't the first 4 years he was in office great for you? She can't answer, and just says it was great back then, but it'll be better now. I asked her what she was excited about, and she couldn't tell me not one policy. She was just excited for him to be back in office. She also said, I like my president with a little edge, so he women. Clinton got a while in office. Okay, so I brought up some policies and asked her, are you for mass deportation? Yes. No one who isn't American should be here. Are you against an X for non-binary on passports? OMG, yes. What more rights do gay people really need? The other topics we discussed, like women's rights and tariffs, were alarming, but again, I let it all go. I was determined to stay friends with someone who felt differently than I did. Then, over the weekend, she makes a post searching for a birthday venue for her 6-year-old. Curious, I go into the comments to read what others are suggesting, and one of her MAGA friends suggests a firing range. She laughs at the suggestion and then replies with a photo of her daughter lying down in a sniper-like position, with a Nerf gun and goggles for eye protection. Another friend replies to that photo saying, "That's our girl, pew pew," and the guy responds, "If only they made fictional miniguns for smaller children." Mortified, I messaged my friend privately since I was not going to start an argument with these people on Facebook. I tell her that perhaps she was unaware of this, but here's a teachable moment. "Your post was a bit white privileged and tone deaf." She replied, "You're wild. It's a Nerf gun. No one's gotten hurt over a Nerf gun." So I said, "Funny how you think that since you did put her in goggles for protection, but also, that's your white privilege coming out if you think no one has ever gotten hurt or died over a toy gun." She told me I was overreacting and that she was defending her friend who made the post, but she dismissed my feelings altogether. It made me uncomfortable, and she didn't care. I told her this was the line for me, and I blocked her on everything. I was curious about how far gone she is, so I googled her name and found many gays against groomer videos, podcasts, and one article I thought was interesting. In the article, she was interviewed and said how she was part of the LGBTQ community as bisexual. My mouth hung open in shock. That article eventually led me to her secret, bisexual mama Instagram filled with anti-gay posts. My friend, who I've known for years, mind you, is not bisexual. She lied about being bisexual to appeal to other gays and try to convince them that certain things are wrong and we should be mad about a children's book that talks about being non-binary, or get angry over an all-gender bathroom, or get disgusted over drag queens reading to children. I think that this time around, it's about whether someone makes you feel comfortable or not. Her hate speech makes me feel uncomfortable being around her, even if she isn't directly saying it to me or to people around me. It still shows her true colors and character. This is who she has always been. And the person she's been with me is the facade. I feel like I made the right decision, but I also feel like I might sound crazy. OP is not an AH for cutting off his friend because of her extreme political views and hate speech. So I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's friend is for such extreme views and hypocrisy, and I would rate her 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye, see you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.